Today I'm going to talk about the dividing of the word. Paul writes to Timothy and he says, study. When you study, it means you take a book and you check it out, check it out. How do you study? In Isaiah, it says we must seek out the book and find the mates, and then we'll understand how the purposes of God work. But he says here, study to show yourself approved unto God. A workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So the word of truth is actually Christ. But Christ is worked into the book. And we know Hebrews 10 says, in the volume of the book, it's written about me. I have come to do your will. In the volume of the book, a body is prepared. So the whole Bible is about Jesus Christ. And we have to understand and divide the book. But we have to also discern the body. Now, it goes on here and says, shun profane and vain babblings, for they will increase unto more ungodliness, and their word will eat as doth a cancer, of whom Hymenaeus and Philetus, who concerning the truth, come on guys, Jesus Christ is the word of truth in the word, concerning the truth have erred, saying that the resurrection is past already, and overthrow the faith of some. Now, I was in a conversation with someone and he asked me that, where is my husband? And I said, well, Kobus is with God, that's for sure. And he says, so he's already been resurrected. And I'm like, what? And it really threw me off course for a little while, till I studied and I realized, oh, wait. The resurrection has to do with the body, not with the spirit. The minute we are born again, we are already quickened in the spirit. So the division is also into realms. You have to understand realms. Now there is a rightly dividing the word, and there is a wrongly dividing the word. So what is rightly dividing? Rightly dividing leads unto life. Wrongly dividing leads unto destruction. Now, when God created everything, He rightly divided everything because He planned for man to live eternal. So in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So God divided. He sent forth His Spirit. His Spirit came from Him, but they were one. When your body cell starts growing, the cells divide, but it doesn't go in two bodies immediately. You have to reproduce for that. So the dividing of cells is for the growing. So God divided Himself. In Him was life, and the life was the light. And this light came onto the earth. Oh my word. And the first thing He said is, let there be light. You could just as well say, let there be life. And this life, the first, had to be divided from the darkness. So everything God made from that time was in the life realm, perfection. So there came, on the second day, there was a dividing of water and water. Then came the dividing of land and water. Everything was a dividing, which was a preparation for the filling. And when everything was prepared, filled, then God put Adam on the earth. God made man in perfection. And God said to him, do not eat from that tree. Because there were two trees in the garden, a tree of life and a tree of knowledge of good and evil. God did not give them a choice. He said, if you eat, you will die. So what did he do? He ate. What had happened? Then time kicked in. Now, time was, the DNA for time was built into the creation day on day 4th. And He says it's so good in Genesis 1 verse 14. He says there will be two lights. They would be for a dividing of night and day. And signs and seasons and days and years. These days and years is the first time that he actually speaks about the 24 hours that we find ourselves in. So the minute Adam ate, the day of death started, and man became a lower nature. And we really, Ecclesiastes describes this very good for us. He says, Ecclesiastes 3:19, for that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beast, even one thing befalleth them all. As the one dieth, so the other one die. And the other one, yea, they have all one breath, so that a man have no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. Now, all is vanity, this is what Solomon said in his fallen state, but he was exactly right. It seems that man has just been degraded to absolutely nothing. So if we jump back to Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1, he says, to everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under heaven. And then he goes on with what happens to man in his life cycle. You see, because God says, I am the beginning and the end. He does not have a beginning and an end, but God is one, and he never separated. He was in unity. Though the Spirit came from the Father and creation came from it, it was all a unity. And he says, he is the beginning and the end. He is one. But when man sinned, time broke out, and it is literally a cycle in the line of eternity. And in this cycle of time, there are little cycles, and this is where we find ourselves. We have a cycle of existing, and it's so nicely described here. He says, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which was planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. I was in a conversation with someone the other day, and he actually said to me that the church is stupid. They're not very clever because they do not know how to work with money, and they cannot make it in this world. And I'm thinking, yeah, it is actually the truth. But then I thought in my heart, but how clever is the world that can reach all these wonderful things and it's not eternal? So what does it help? You win everything and you lose your soul. But now in our little cycles, if we can discern time and seasons, that is when we step out of our little circle and we step into God's purposes, which is from beginning to end. And this just helps us to get to from beginning to end. And at this point, when you step into God's purposes, and we can look back in history, there are so many godly men that came in and brought a change into this natural realm. And they could only do this by stepping up into a purpose that is bigger than their little existence. God has more for you than just eating and sleeping and going to work, and eating and sleeping, going to work and pay accounts and hide for Corona. There's much more in life than that. But if we do not understand times and seasons, we cannot understand God's purposes, because there is a time and a season for every purpose under the sun. Romans 3 tells us that from Adam to Moses, death reigned. Romans 5 goes on and he says, from Moses to Christ, the law reigned. So Christ brought in a whole new situation, because he didn't annul the law, he swallowed up the law. He fulfilled the law. In other words, everything that the law stood for was fulfilled in Christ. Although the people of the law did not receive the Christ, Christ still fulfilled the law, and he brought a new day. So that makes the cross, the crucifixion of the Christ, the final sacrifice of the Lamb, that makes the cross the dividing line throughout all generations of time, through all the seasons are built in this time. And he says, in the fullness of time, the climax of the ages. And I just love what he says. In Christ, whom we have redemption through the blood, even the forgiveness of sin, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by him were all things created that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible, invisible, whether they be thrones, dominions, principalities, or powers. All things were created by him and for him. He came from the Father, and creation came from him. And beginning means before time. The word reshith, which means the head or the principal thing. And he says here in verse 17, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning of the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have preeminence. When Jesus came, he was called the only begotten. Now he is called the first begotten. So it was a time of reformation. Now, the biggest misunderstanding in the church is when people say that Martin Luther brought reformation. No, Jesus Christ brought reformation. So we really need to understand what this reformation is. And to get it, we need to rightly divide times and seasons, days and years.